Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving right into a seriously fascinating strategy for building future-proof businesses, and doing it without risking everything up front. We're going to unpack Vijay Govindarajan's The Three-Box Solution, specifically looking at how you can systematically invent the future.
But hey, before we get bogged down in the theory, I've got a quick question for you. Have you ever suffered through a cup of just absolutely rancid, scorched office coffee? You know the kind. It's been sitting on that glass warming plate literally all morning. Yeah, we've all been there. But what if I told you that enduring that terrible, bitter cup of coffee was actually the seed for a billion-dollar innovation?
Let's look at Box 3, Creating the Future.
So our source material introduces this framework where Box 3 is the strategic space entirely dedicated to building your future. And honestly, this is exactly why Box 3 is so incredibly tough for established companies. You have to draw a hard line between it and Box 1. See, Box 1 is your present, your core business. It's all about running at peak efficiency, hitting those quarterly numbers, and stamping out variance. Box 3, that is your nonlinear future. It requires a complete 180 in your mindset. You have to actually embrace risk, expand variance, and run continuous experiments. You just can't measure Box 3 projects with Box 1 metrics because your immediate goal isn't revenue, it's learning.
Moving on to Part 2, Catching Weak Signals.
If our ultimate goal here is to invent a nonlinear future, we have to ask, where on earth do the ideas actually come from? Well, the source material calls this raw material weak signals. And what are they? They are those emergent, fuzzy, unclear changes happening out in the wild, in technology, culture, or markets. Just like the name implies, they're super hard to pin down at first. They're incomplete. But if you're really paying attention, they give you the critical clues needed to anticipate massive market shifts way before everyone else does.
Which actually brings us right back to that terrible office coffee we talked about. Back in the 1980s, a young guy named John Sylvan was dealing with his tech office's coffee needs. Faced day in and day out with this bitter, stale drip coffee, he had a real eureka moment. He just looked at the problem and thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. That exact maverick sensibility, that's almost always the spark for great Box 3 ideas.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the specific weak signal Sylvan and his co-founder managed to pick up on. Right around that time, gourmet coffee shops like Starbucks were just starting to explode. But the weak signal wasn't merely that cafes were popular. No, it was that these shops were fundamentally changing the context for coffee consumption across the board. Sylvan realized consumers were developing a taste for a truly premium coffee experience, and eventually they'd demand that exact same quality at work and at home, not just when they were sitting in a cafe.
Let's jump into Part 3, Low-Cost Experiments and Shrinking Uncertainty.
Okay, let's dive into this. Recognizing a weak signal is awesome, but you absolutely cannot just take a massive blind leap into a new market on a hunch. That's a recipe for disaster. So, to safely test their weak signals and dial down the uncertainty, the founders of Keurig built out a phased, highly experimental strategy. Step 1 was simply running trials in the smaller, much more controlled office market. Then Step 2, which wouldn't happen until years later, was the big expansion into the massive household consumer market.
Part 4, Mastering the Office, which was Keurig's very first test.
Let's zoom in on that execution phase, back in the late 90s, when their one and only focus was cracking that office market. To test their critical assumptions, they ran a real-world proof of concept. Basically, they handed out prototype brewers to about 25 Boston area businesses. Now, this was a very low-cost experiment. And honestly, the early machines were a mess. They broke down constantly. But here is the critical takeaway. Even with glitchy hardware, people didn't tell Keurig to pack up and leave. They loved the concept. They literally just begged the company to fix the machines. For Keurig, that was huge. It proved they were absolutely on the right track.
The office market also let them test another huge assumption, the economics. I mean, could they really charge 50 cents for a single K-Cup pod? To put that into perspective, that was 5 times the cost of a traditional cup of brewed coffee. And the answer was a resounding yes. Office managers completely bought in, they loved the convenience and the obvious boost to staff morale and productivity. It proved without a doubt that consumers were more than willing to pay a premium for a mess-free, high-quality experience.
Now for Part 5, Planned Opportunism and the Consumer Market Launch.
So Keurig totally crushed the office market. They were actually profitable by the year 2000, but they definitely didn't stop there. They shifted into their next strategic phase, using a concept called planned opportunities. The source material defines this as the discipline of becoming as well prepared as possible to act on whatever circumstances fate throws your way. Instead of just getting comfortable in the office market, Keurig used that time to actively build their brand, iron out their manufacturing tech, and forge these vital partnerships, all so that when they finally made the leap to retail, they were ready for literally anything.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly how they went about shrinking their uncertainty before trying to launch into people's homes. They rigorously tested 4 critical assumptions. First, they verified that home consumers actually wanted a premium product. Second, they figured out that shoppers would be willing to buy a brewer priced somewhere between $129 and $199. Third, they made absolutely sure their technology was finally reliable. And lastly, they validated this brilliant strategy of roaster neutrality, basically partnering with a bunch of different coffee brands rather than chaining themselves to just one. It was the perfect way to satisfy everyone's unique tastes.
But here's the thing. Testing assumptions only works if you have the guts to act on the bad news too. Right on the verge of their consumer launch, Keurig realized their planned home brewer design, the B100, had some serious cost and performance flaws. It takes a tremendous amount of leadership courage to admit a mistake like that, but Keurig boldly killed that sunk investment. They just stopped, brought the engineering entirely in-house, and fixed the technology before hitting the market. That specific ability to learn and adapt, that is the heartbeat of any successful Box 3 strategy.
Let's wrap things up with a conclusion and a critical question. As we bring this home, let's connect the incredible Keurig story right back to the core theory we started with. Box 3 innovation is not about taking wild, blind leaps of faith into the unknown. It's actually an endless, disciplined cycle. You identify those weak signals, you run patient, low-cost experiments, you rigorously test your critical assumptions, and then you adapt based on exactly what you learn. Basically, you spend a little to learn a lot. That way, when you finally do make that big bet, the odds are heavily stacked in your favor. So, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to chew on. Something you can apply to your own industry in your daily work. Take a hard look at where you're spending your time and your resources. Are you just busy protecting the past, trying to optimize what already exists? Or are you actively experimenting for the future? Because the future ultimately belongs to the people who are willing to test it today. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I really hope this explainer leaves you eager to dig even deeper into the incredible power of the 3-box solution.